Okay, so ready to jump into something kind of interesting.
Always up for a good deep dive, yeah.
Awesome. So today's topic, the source material is calling it the truth about mental health that they don't want you to know.
Intriguing.
Right. Sounds a little, conspiracy theory-ish, but
Yeah.
what we're really doing is exploring those less talked about aspects of mental health. We're going to be using your source material to kind of guide our conversation today.
Makes sense. And I think it's important to acknowledge right off the bat that mental health, it's multifaceted.
For sure.
It's not just black and white. There's not some simple explanation. It's very much an individual experience, a journey.
Yeah, and our sources, they really get into the nuances. One of the first things that jumped out at me was how they talk about stigma. You hear it all the time, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Just get over it or toughen up. It's like people think mental health is a choice, not a real struggle. In fact, one of our sources actually cited a study. Something like 40% of people admitted to hiding their mental health challenges from friends and family.
Wow.
Because of shame.
It's sad, but it's not surprising, right? That kind of stigma prevents people from getting help. It makes them feel isolated, like they have to suffer in silence. And one thing our sources are really clear about is that mental health challenges, they're common.
Right.
And importantly, they're treatable.
So it's almost like we're afraid to talk about it, honestly. And then you've got like movies and TV shows throwing in these extreme portrayals of mental illness. It makes for good TV. But I'm thinking Split, that movie, with dissociative identity disorder.
Oh, come on.
Not exactly accurate.
No, not at all. It all plays into those harmful misconceptions we were talking about.
Yeah.
Depression isn't just about feeling sad. It can manifest in so many different ways. Anxiety isn't just everyday nervousness, right? And our sources really highlight those nuances, how it's different for everyone.
Yeah, so true. Which, makes it that much more frustrating when you actually try to get help.
Oh, tell me about it.
And hit a wall, long wait lists, expensive therapy. It's like the system itself is a barrier.
Think about it. One of the sources actually compared it to like a sinking ship.
Oh, wow.
Too many holes, not enough people to bail the water out.
And that's not even getting into misdiagnosis, right? You can't just take your mental temperature.
That's complex. Symptoms can be so intertwined. Figuring out what's actually going on is like navigating a maze.
Totally.
It's like a puzzle. The pieces are scattered and you're trying to put them together without that picture on the box.
Right.
And that's why those sources, they really emphasize self-advocacy and personalized care.
Okay.
You got to be informed about your options, advocate for what works for you.
Yeah. Because there's definitely no one-size-fits-all solution. And that kind of brings us to medication. It's a tool, but our sources are really pushing for a more holistic approach, right?
Yeah.
They talk about therapy, lifestyle changes, addressing the whole person, not just the symptoms.
You got it. Things like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, help challenge those negative thought patterns, or DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, which focuses more on emotional regulation.
Okay, CBT, DBT, those are great. But what about like exercise and meditation? I know those can be helpful.
Sure.
I'm curious what our sources say about them, how effective they are in addressing mental health.
Great question. And our sources, actually, they spend a good amount of time on those alternative approaches.
Yeah.
They point out that practices like mindfulness, even yoga or spending time in nature, they can have a big impact.
Yeah, it's like we're always looking for that quick fix,
Right.
But sometimes the answers are right there in front of us in how we live our lives. Like how many of us actually prioritize getting enough sleep or manage stress effectively. Even think about how our diet affects our mental well-being.
Such a good point. And our sources, they really emphasize that mind-body connection.
Yeah.
Neglecting our physical health can directly impact our mental health.
Yeah.
Actually, one of the sources cited a study. They found a direct link between chronic sleep deprivation and a higher risk of anxiety and depression.
Wow. That's, pretty hard to ignore, right?
Yeah.
It makes you wonder how much of our modern lifestyle is actually contributing to these like skyrocketing rates of mental health challenges. I'm talking about the hustle culture, this pressure to always be on, the whole comparison game on social media. It's exhausting.
It really is. And that kind of brings us to this really crucial point that our sources keep coming back to. These systemic and societal pressures, they play a huge role in our well-being.
Yeah.
Like income inequality, those unrealistic beauty standards, the 24/7 news cycle. These aren't just background noise, They're shaping our mental landscape.
It's like we're constantly swimming against the current.
Yeah.
And some of us are just better equipped to handle it than others, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious, What do our sources say about technology's impact? Like, it's supposed to make life easier, but sometimes it feels like it just adds to the stress.
Well, one source actually used a really interesting term, digital overwhelm, to describe this, constant bombardment of information, notifications, this pressure to be connected all the time.
Digital overwhelm? That is spot on.
Right. They argue that it's really eroding our attention spans, messing with our sleep, and just fueling anxiety.
So, okay, knowing all of this, how do we navigate this whole complex world of mental health? Are we just like doomed to stress and struggle?
Not at all. But it does require a shift in our mindset, which is where our sources bring in this idea of empowerment and self-care. It's not about waiting for someone else to fix things for you. It's about understanding your own needs, recognizing your own triggers, and actively seeking out what works for you.
It's about taking ownership of your mental well-being. One thing that really resonated with me from the sources was their emphasis on community support, Friends, family, support groups. These connections can be so powerful, especially when we're constantly told to just like go it alone.
It's true. Our sources are really clear that seeking support is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. And they highlight the importance of shared experiences, of knowing that you're not alone in your struggles. In fact, one of the sources even shared a personal story about how joining a support group for people with anxiety was a turning point in their recovery.
It's like that saying, right? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And mental health, it's definitely a marathon, not a sprint.
Couldn't agree more.
So we've covered a lot, the stigma, the limitations of the system, the need for those holistic approaches and all those societal pressures. It can feel overwhelming. But our sources also make it clear that there's hope.
Absolutely. And one of the most empowering messages I took away was the importance of destigmatizing help seeking. You don't have to wait till you hit rock bottom to ask for help. Reaching out early, seeking support when you need it, can make a huge difference in the long run.
It's about changing the narrative, right? Moving away from that idea that asking for help is weak.
One of the sources made a really powerful point about how vulnerability is often seen as a negative thing, but it's actually the key to connection and healing. It takes courage to be open about your struggles, to ask for help. And it's in those moments of vulnerability that true connection and healing can happen.
Wow, that's such a powerful reframing of vulnerability. It's not weakness, it's being human. And, when we talk about seeking help, it's important to acknowledge that access to affordable, quality mental health care is a major issue for so many people.
Definitely. And this is where advocacy and systemic change come in. Our sources don't shy away from this. They point out that we need to push for better funding, more resources, and just a more equitable mental health care system.
So it's not just about individual responsibility, it's about creating a society that actually prioritizes well-being for everyone.
Exactly. Addressing those root causes, the societal pressures, the inequalities, the systemic barriers, all of those things contribute to mental health challenges in the first place.
Okay, before we move on to some final thoughts, what resonates most with you from all of this? What's really sticking with you so far?
Yeah, it's a lot, isn't it? But also, I don't know, it feels kind of empowering, like having this deeper understanding.
Totally. Knowledge is power, right?
Mhm.
Understanding these complexities, the systemic issues, the ways we can take control, it all helps us navigate things better.
Absolutely. So before we wrap up this deep dive, what can we do with all this? What are the actionable steps here?
Well, one source put it really well. They said mental health is not just the absence of problems, it's about cultivating well-being, resilience, and a fulfilling life.
Wow, that's a good quote. It totally shifts things.
Yeah, it's not just about surviving, it's about thriving.
So practically speaking, that'll look different for everyone. But there are some common threads throughout the sources, like just being mindful of how we talk about mental health.
Hmm.
Can we ditch the judgment, be more supportive?
Yeah, like challenging those dismissive comments and being more open about our own struggles, I guess, to help normalize it.
Exactly. And modeling those healthy habits for ourselves and for the people around us. Prioritizing sleep, managing stress, finding those healthy coping mechanisms, it sends a powerful message.
Actions speak louder than words, right?
Exactly.
We can talk about it all day, but if we're not taking care of ourselves,
Right.
kind of hypocritical.
Yeah, yeah. And then there's the bigger picture, right? Advocating for change, supporting those organizations, doing good work, contacting our representatives, pushing for policies that prioritize well-being.
Because it's not enough to just focus on individual solutions, right?
We need that systemic change.
Yeah.
We need to address those root causes.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what's one thing you're taking away from this conversation? What's resonating with you?
For me, it's that reminder that we're not alone in this. Mental health challenges, they're incredibly common. There is no shame in seeking support. And even more importantly, we have more power than we realize to shape our own well-being.
Love that. And remember, the truth is, mental health isn't a destination, it's an ongoing journey. It's about learning, growing, and connecting.
And you have the strength to navigate that journey. Don't ever forget that.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.